hotter the conflict, the greater the triumph.
A fiercest serpent may be overcome by a swarm of ants.
Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. Age wrinkles the body, quitting wrinkles the soul.
Battle buddies.
Battle buddies.
Kevin's got bits. Kevin's got bits. Kevin's got bits. Kevin's got bits.
Yeah, I got bits. Actually, I almost didn't have a bit today.
Really?
Yeah, it came to me in the 11th hour.
I have something if you don't have something.
Oh, I have something, but I do want to hear yours.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
I had I had a very veteran moment this morning. My wife is begging me to go get my ears checked because I'm hard of hearing badly.
Not like selectively, like it's just
No. I have really bad hearing.
Yeah.
She said something in the parking lot this morning and was looking at me, and I was like, she was like, "Did you really truly not hear that?" I was like, "No, I didn't." And so I listened to my wife, as I do, and I called.
As we do.
Yes, sir. And I called the VA, and I was like, "Hey, I need to make an appointment for hearing because it turns out, being around the things that I was around, I can't really hear anymore." And he was like, "Semper Fi, brother." He was like, "Me too." He just knew that I was like in the Marine Corps. Oh, and after our conversation, I told him to listen to our podcast.
Nice. You gotta
Yeah.
plug it at the end.
I did.
You gotta plug it. Absolutely.
Let's hear your cool bit.
Okay, well, so here's how desperate I got. I was like, maybe ChatGPT can give me an idea.
Oh no.
So
Did you really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh God.
I'm trying to use it, and I gotta say, I'm not loving ChatGPT. I don't know. I guess because I'm using it for like comedy stuff, and it's never really working out. But okay, so I was like, what? I was like, write me a World War II Air Force joke, and it said, why did the World War II Air Force pilot break up with his girlfriend? Because she said she was always playing hard to catch.
Seriously?
Yeah. Boo, it's lame.
You suck, ChatGPT.
All right.
Brasato likes ChatGPT.
I don't hate it.
He's a dum-dum.
You gotta edit it.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool if
He was saying that shit was right. The writing on ChatGPT was better than his own writing.
No, you're wrong, Prasato. You have more value. ChatGPT is cool if you never learned to free write. If
Chris,
you never learned how to free write, yes, it's cool.
Chris, you're better than that.
You are.
Don't be so hard on yourself, dude.
You have value.
Yeah, dude.
We see you.
I would rather his cat write his stories than ChatGPT.
I don't really feel like I need it to generate ideas. I'm always generating stupid ideas.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
I got nothing but
I don't
stupid
need
ideas.
ChatGPT to generate ideas.
All right, but my question, this is kind of based off like a meme I saw, but theirs was like really specific, so I wanted to go more general. Let's say you are in a tragic accident, right? You get hit by a car. Brutal, man. Just really worried about you. I go to the hospital to see you. Don't know if you're alive or dead. What song do I play where like you can't help but wake up to sing the lyrics to? Like if you don't wake up to sing those lyrics, you gone. I'm gonna pull that plug for you, friend.
Well, I'm gonna say probably the only song that I know by heart that I can sing at karaoke.
Ooh, a karaoke song. Okay, I like that.
"Fuck Her Gently" by Tenacious D.
That's a great one.
Yeah, dude, I fucking love that song.
Man, so that is something that you do really like that song. That's the second time we've talked about it.
I would wake up and be like, "I wanna fuck you hard."
So you're kind of like legitimately jealous that Wee Man sang that to the group that I was with at karaoke.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Damn.
Every time that dude, not to like toot my own horn, but when I sing that at karaoke, it crushes.
I bet
People are
you
like singing along, and they're like, "Oh, you're actually hitting the C notes, dude. Good job." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been practicing."
That's a fun song.
It is a fun song. What is yours? What would be your version of what I just said?
I don't even know.
Do you not?
I feel like I go through like cycles all the time.
Maybe some Bjork.
I was like, maybe I was like, any song that has like a weird harmony where they go ah in the background, those always get me.
Oh, well, weird harmony would be Beach Boys.
Beach Boys would work, like Good Vibrations, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah, the Beach Boys gives me anxiety.
Yeah, because their harmonies are wild.
They're very weird.
They're not doing the thirds, right? They're doing like fourths and stuff. Like they're doing wacky shit. What else would it be? I feel like maybe some emo songs.
Tonight's the night, then something.
Like some Chiodos.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, it'd be hard not to, like, let's just... And then, like, you don't play the last part, I have to wake up, stop!
He's like, stop.
Or some...
Everything.
Maybe any song from The Last Waltz.
That's the answer. The
That
answer is The Last Waltz.
Last Waltz, for sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to fucking Battle Buddies, dude.
Woo!
We are so goddamn stoked to be here, dude. Especially on a day like today when you're a teacher and sometimes, things don't necessarily go your way. But this is a labor of fucking love.
Absolutely.
Ain't nothing going to stop us doing this. And so if you're listening, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. Do us a favor and rate and review if you haven't already done so. We are continuing our journey through the Masters of the Air book. And tonight, I believe episode 3 is dropping of the show. And for us, this is episode also 3, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So welcome back. We're trudging through it. It's an extremely fun story to be a part of.
Yeah.
So welcome. Let's get in it.
Let's do it.
Cool.
It's me. It's me. Let's do it. All right. Just fucking with you all. I have an outline.
Looking at me like, all right, cool, go.
All right, before we begin today, I want to bring up an issue I am having with this story. Spencer and I have talked about this like 2 times now. Because it is a relatively recent event based in our country and the carnage that people went through, I am fighting the urge to judge the actions and behaviors with my modern lens. It is interesting to me that I notice myself doing this more often than more recent battles we've covered, like Ya Drang. And I'm wondering, why is that? So what I'm trying to say is, when we're doing a lot of these different battles, I'm not really having a hard time like separating its history, and so like I don't need to place a judgment on it, like unless it's like for purposes of a joke or something, or we're just trying to understand it and have fun with it. But overall, I'm just trying to like, what are the facts? Like, what really happened? Let's just evaluate it. But with this one, I'm like, I hate you, like, or you're cool. Like, I'm like making like value judgments all the time, and I don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this earlier. I think the fact that it's a world war changes things a little bit.
And it's like the war we all learned the most about growing up, right?
I mean, I don't necessarily understand. There's just such a global fascination with World War II.
I still have 7th graders when we're talking about history. Like, I know everything about World War II tanks, but I hate all other forms of history. Like,
what is that?
Like, what the hell happened to you? Like,
yeah. So we talked about this a little bit where in one of our first episodes about Masters of the Air, there's something very like romantic about it.
That's true.
And even when you watch the show, you're like, oh man, he's wearing,
the show is
aviators
full on romantic.
Yeah, dude, they're like drinking beers in Europe.
Yeah.
And it looks really fun. And that's one thing that, to caveat exactly what you're talking about here, where you're judging these, characters, these people, is like, this was pretty unethical, pretty immoral.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucked up. When we do our next episode where I get into the details of when they start bombing Germany and you hear about the civilians and how it affected them, it's bad.
It's not great.
It's really, really bad.
And that brings up a good point, because it's almost, I think we had gotten to this point when we talked about this last time. The idea that their whole premise for this, they knew that they were going to be bombing cities before they even joined World War II, years before, because of what we learned about Mitchell and those like that Italian guy beforehand. So to me, there's like a premeditated thing to this.
Yeah, and that hurts.
It hurts because the whole thesis in my mind, and maybe I had the thesis wrong. So maybe like if you know more about like that time period and like what I'm talking about, like the rhetoric and stuff of their like battle plan, it was that the ends justify the means. They wanted a short war, and to justify a short war, they're going to use Clausewitz, and they're going to use these Italian guys, and they're going to use like some of the early proto Royal Air Force stuff, and say bomb the fuck out of everybody.
Yep.
And it will justify it, and it doesn't work.
No.
It goes on for years.
Right. So what does that mean?
So what does that mean?
It means that it's not justified.
Yeah, it's like I want to place a value judgment.
Yeah. And then, the whole thing, we talked about this earlier as well. World War I was fucked up with the chemical warfare and the trench warfare and all that stuff. But for those of you who are watching the show and you're seeing these visuals of them in the air, like it's also pretty fucked up.
Dude, we're going to get into it. Let's get into it today.
Let's go.
Okay. So anyway, I'm putting that out there first because it's something that I noticed about myself writing and thinking, and I am trying to avoid it, but it's definitely creeping in. And so take that with a grain of salt as a listener. Like, decide if I'm being fair or not and make your own decisions.
Yeah.
That being said, strap in, folks, because today's going to be a wild ride in depressurized cabins over enemy territory. It's fucked up. Like, from now on, the book's messed up.
Trigger warning, I guess.
It's hardcore episodes
you have,
from here on out.
Sensitive stomach.
It's
or
the
mind.
most intense parts of Yadring Valley the whole way through.
Yeah, no, this is this book and this story is shockingly some of the most fucked up shit we've covered.
And it's weird because you just are not expecting it.
No, it like affects my sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so on our World War II timeline, we started in 1942 with the creation of the 8th Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Then Spencer took us through to the end of 1942 and into the beginning of 1943. Now we're going to jump back slightly to the beginning of 1943, January. All right. In Casablanca in 1943, Eaker, Arnold, Roosevelt, and Churchill met to discuss the future of the 8th. This event is up for debate, but here is what we know maybe. Churchill and Roosevelt met first, and Roosevelt agreed that after the North African campaign was over, the 8th would support the RAF in nighttime bombing. Arnold supposedly calls Eaker right after it, gives him 24 hours to come to Casablanca, save the 8th, literally saying something to the equivalent of, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope."
Only hope. Nice reference.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we're clear with that first part.
Yes, sir.
So Churchill is a figure, man. We've been talking more and more about him. That's the thing that's been coming up from our reading is like future episodes are going to be on Churchill because
I'm excited.
he is a warping figure in human history, and especially Western European history.
Not a perfect person.
Not a perfect person, and it makes him fun to study.
It's true. True.
Probably terrifying to work under.
He's
fun
like
to study.
the antithesis of Hitler, bro. Like
He is.
like he's this. You know what I mean?
He's like a foil to Hitler.
You needed a Churchill to defeat Hitler.
Yes, I would agree with that. All right, so Eaker then gets to Casablanca. He meets with Churchill and tries to convince him. Eaker reported that Churchill was not completely sold on Eaker's, like he has like a memo and he has like a little speech. Churchill reported that he was immediately convinced. So this is where we're dealing with these higher ups. We're dealing with them reflecting on how these secret meetings went. And this is where the history gets a little nebulous because one guy says one thing, one guy says another thing.
Yeah.
Here's what I have to say about it. In my mind, both men were interested and are interested up until their death in being remembered as correct and would be willing to remember these types of meetings in any way that suited them. So take that with a grain of salt about how these meetings happened.
Of course.
I included the Casablanca conference for a couple reasons. One being that we should always remember these men deciding the fates of millions of people were not divorced from their personal egos. Remember, we're just talking about like just 2 meetings in 2 days, and they're not even remembering these meetings correctly, but they are huge meetings. They're deciding how millions of dollars of military weapons are going to be used for the next like 2 years. And they can't even remember it the same. So like, that's fucked up. Like,
Of course.
they care about how they're going to be remembered, and like they're deciding a lot of shit without divorcing themselves from ego, which I think is crazy, but I guess it makes sense in some way. 2, how close the 8th was to being absorbed over and over again. Because basically that's what Churchill wanted, right? He was going to absorb all of the 8th into his RAF, and then who knows if America would ever have an Air Force after that, if that happened. Like that's kind of wild to think about that. What if, like, go down that path? It definitely wouldn't look like what it looks like now. It wouldn't be its own entity, that's for sure.
Right.
It may still be tied to the army. I don't know. That's
Good question.
kind of crazy to think about. You can believe whatever you want about Arnold, Spatz, and Eaker. I definitely have my opinions on those 3. But we all have to admit that the 8th would have been gone before it started without them. Like, there's no way it got off the ground. There's no way it got to England, and there's no way it stayed intact while it was in England without those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely without Mitchell paving that road for them, fucking up his career in the process, but that's whatever it is. 3rd, and one that non-military history buffs don't realize, the German air superiority was preventing the Allies from invading places like Normandy in France. That's not something that was always clear to me. Miller has a biting quote about all this. In this air brawl between German fighters and unescorted American bombers, Eaker was confident that the 8th would prevail. It was one of the largest mistakes of the war.
Really?
Miller is not always going to outright attack Eaker and Arnold and Spatz, but when he does, he definitely has like all of his resources ready for like to support that kind of an attack. So when he does, as the reader, you should be like, oh man, it must be even worse than this. You know, if he's willing to write it down, he must have so much damning evidence that this was just like the wrong call.
Yeah. I had listened to him talk on this podcast, School of War, that I was telling you about, and he definitely grew up in, I want to say Pennsylvania, where he was surrounded by World War II vets growing up, and he's like, man, these are like admirable dudes. This is the best generation ever. And then as he was like going through like 150 different documents reading about the 8th Air Force, he was like, whoa, this
is kind of wild.
These guys are fucked up. Yeah. Yeah, those are the pens.
Those are the pens. All right, the invasion was scheduled for spring of 1944. That meant that the 8th had to deliver on their promise in just about a year. Miller does a good job summarizing the first push into Germany. On January 27, 1943, the 8th Air Force made its first penetration of German airspace, hitting the submarine yards at Wilhelmshaven.
Where is that, though? That's in Germany?
On the North Sea.
Okay.
So that'd be more, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. I had it on my map. I don't have it right now.
What's it called? Sorry, say it one more time.
Yeah, so it's Wilhelmshaven.
Okay.
On the North Sea.
Okay.
Ira Eaker gave the 306 Bomb Group and its newly promoted commander, General Frank Armstrong, the honor of being first over Germany. This was Armstrong's reward for taking over the decimated 306 earlier that month and restoring discipline and morale. The central story of the novel 12 O'Clock High.
Well, that was a novel first?
I don't know if he's saying it's a novel or the novel story.
I got you, like a new idea. Got it, okay.
But that is interesting. I think it's just a movie. I quoted it right, I know that. Interesting. So, we're all clear what's going on. This is basically what Spencer was talking about last time, is like bombing these fucking pens and trying to get through to them and shit.
Yeah, so that was important because these submarines were going out into the Atlantic and stopping the United States from bringing all of their shit to help with North Africa at the time and Britain.
And the invasion that the Allies, I think another thing to remember is like the Allies know from like as soon as it's all going on, like Churchill knows that we're going to invade eventually. He's putting all of his like gambling chips into that stack of like, I'm going to get people to invade with me.
Yes.
I just don't know when.
Right.
And so they need to get rid of the air superiority because the Luftwaffe are like fucking terrifying.
They're good.
And the U-boats are called the Wolfpack, which we'll talk about later, about how they're just devastating. Yep. And they had to get rid of both of them.
Hey man, the Germans are a formidable force.
Yeah.
Like they're
only a shell of what they used to be.
Yep.
That's crazy. All right.
Who's this stud?
Yeah. Let's talk about him. One of the strangest things about this time period is the amount of famous reporters, actors, and directors that flew in these missions.
Yes, sir.
For example, as we can see on our slide here, Walter Cronkite was one of 8 reporters given access to fly. They were called the Flying Typewriters, which is a pretty dope name. They also had some other names. One name was cool. They were called the Legion of the Doomed.
That's cooler than the Flying Typewriters.
I like the Flying Typewriters.
It sounds like the fucking Flaming Glasses.
It sounds like a ska band I want to start. Like we're the Flying Typewriters.
That actually is. That's
It's better than their lame name, the Writing 69th.
Is that truly what they're called?
That was one of their
69?
Yeah, I was like 69's kind of fun, I guess. Legion of the Doom's pretty dope though.
Yeah.
But they're mainly known as the Flying Typewriters. So it's like 8 reporters from America were over there.
That's a huge deal.
Big deal.
Shout out to journalists, dude. You guys are heroes.
Yeah, embedded journalism is
huge.
And until we've started doing this type of research, I didn't realize how necessary it is that we embed at all times.
It is the same thing when we talk about ancient warfare,
Right.
and we talk about these couriers, and we're like, how come these couriers don't get like killed? And you're like, bro, this is like an unwritten rule like throughout the like mankind.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with reporters. It's like, no, freedom of the press is like, that's number one.
We need to remember what happens later on.
Absolutely.
So we are clear, these reporters would be flying during the missions and would be in extreme danger because, like Spencer said, unwritten rule, you try not to shoot the reporters, I imagine. But it doesn't matter when they're on an airplane.
Yeah, you can't tell.
Can't tell, and it doesn't matter. There's an airplane that's trying to drop bombs on your country, you're going to blow them up. Cronkite's boss said, I like this quote from his boss, "I was not happy about it, but a dozen elephants could not have kept Walter out of the B-17. That's dope. That's dope.
I never knew that Walter Cronkite had technically combat experience.
I know.
That's crazy.
Like legitimate combat experience.
Yeah, I never knew that.
Their first and essentially... Also, the problem is they only really flew one mission, which we'll talk about. Okay, so their first mission is essentially their last mission. And it happens on February 26th. While en route to bomb a secondary target, the submarine pin in Wilhelmshaven, to that slide that we had just shown, one of the reporters, Bob Post, he gets hit by the Luftwaffe. I know I was doing a little bit of research trying to figure out like which plane he was on. The best I could figure out was that he was part of Robert Morgan's 44th bombing group, but I don't know who his actual pilot was. Here's what the 44th said about Post. During the 10 days he was here, Post won the confidence of all men and officers. They recognized his sincerity and his courage, for they constantly go through the same dangers themselves and they know the odds. He came at a time when the group had been badly shot up, when our losses had been heavy, when it seemed few people appreciated what they were suffering. Bob Post got close to our men. They poured out their story to him and felt his purpose was to help them win the war. It encouraged them to have the feeling that the people of the United States would be given a true picture of what they were trying to do and what must be done at home if democracy is to survive." Pretty intense.
High praise.
Yeah, I just wanted to like include that because this guy dies right here and he's an embedded reporter. We're just talking about like, this is an important job, like unsung heroes of wars.
Dude, absolutely. Heroes. Shout out to the current journalist in a dangerous place right now as we speak.
I know. Because it's the same thing right now, right? IEDs don't care if you're a reporter or not. You're going to trigger them whether you do.
Do you think bombs in Gaza care about a reporter? Like, I guarantee you there's been some journalists who have died from this whole Israel conflict currently.
Damn. I'm left with two main thoughts. First, we almost lost Walter Cronkite before he could become what we called the most trusted man in America. We almost didn't have him.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's wild to me.
Yeah, that is.
Two, Bob Post never got a chance to compete against Cronkite. Who knows how far the two of them would have pushed each other as journalists. And maybe it never would have happened. But getting that report from the 44th, and then like, it's pretty similar praise that Cronkite was getting. So it's like, what was this guy's potential? Yeah. You know, like, I don't know. I was just sat there thinking about it for a while. In May, anyway, that essentially stops the journalist from going up into the air for a while. And there's more to the Bob Post story if you are interested in learning more about. There's like, he has like premonition that he's going to die in that day. It was weird. I think his wife was like getting flown over too. It's like a whole fucked up thing. Yeah.
Fuck?
There's a whole bunch to it.
So if you want more, read the book is what you're saying?
Yeah, or just look it up. There's a lot to today's that I cut, and today's is still a long episode.
You're welcome.
And I cut so much shit that I didn't want to, but I was like, I can't talk about every single thing, and I had to rearrange a bunch.
Trimming the fat.
Yep. Okay. In May, after a successful bombing run, Eager pushed the propaganda with some bold claims about being able to safely bomb anything they wanted in the daylight.
Oh, boy.
And Cronkite, when later describing accuracy during this time, wrote, "And most of us newsmen abandoned any thought of impropriety as we reported on the heroism of our boys and bestiality of the hated Nazis." So I left that in just to remind us of what's happening even right now when we're watching the Masters of the Air show, and like I'm having problems with some of like the retconning stuff they're doing and the smoothing over. But it's hard because even in the United States at this time period, they're being fed a smoothed over story. And even Walter Cronkite, who is quoted as the most trusted man in America, is owning up to doing this. Like they're all doing it because they're like, shit's fucked up right now, and this is what we have to do.
Yes.
And I'm not saying good. I'm not making a value judgment on Walter Cronkite. He's above me. But it is kind of weird that like the most trusted man in America is owning up to essentially lying to the American people.
Yeah, they're spinning a fucking narrative,
Yeah.
dude. Yeah, I think that's an important thing. If you are currently watching the show and listening to us at the same time, the American public was being lied to about the accuracy of these bombs.
Iker's saying they won't. He's saying they can safely go anywhere they want and just bomb whoever they want.
Wild. So here's a question. How do you think the American public would react to that now, given the internet and how fast news travels?
I don't know. Now it's so
People
weird.
would be pissed.
Yeah.
People would be pissed.
I think they would.
Yeah, we're such a society of like truth seeking that it wouldn't go over well. How is it even going over well now? You're sitting here casually being like, Walter Cronkite had to lie.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? It's just weird.
Well, it's weird that it doesn't. When I was reading Walter Cronkite's stuff, it made it sound like he wasn't really even under pressure. He felt it was the right thing to do too. That's weird to me.
Same.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, maybe we're the assholes for telling the truth.
Yeah. I get it, I guess, to some degree. Like, you do when you're like trying to use rhetoric and you're trying to look at like morale, you have to spin a little bit.
Yeah.
Because everything is spun to some degree when you speak it.
So would you say a good comparison would be like at halftime of whatever sport, this team is down by a lot, a coach has to go in there and be like, we're going to be fine.
Right.
He can't just go in there and be like, we're fucked.
Yeah.
I don't even know why we're going to go out there for the second half. It's like that would be like a very similar comparison.
That would be best case comparison. That would be like everybody, because that's more just giving you the best option you have available. Mm-hmm. And so maybe that's what Cronkite was. That's a good point. Maybe that's what Cronkite felt. They're like, we're already here. There's already planes. These boys are already dying. Me stopping this isn't going to bring those boys back, and it's not going to end the war.
Yeah.
Like, I could see myself making that kind of like hard calculation of like, am I going to just put a wrench in this thing?
Yeah.
And it won't solve anything. We're still at war with Nazis who want to take over the whole world.
Exactly.
What is it called? Liebensteinen or whatever? Like breathing room? Like, fuck breathing room, man. Like, that shit's so stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. That's interesting.
It is interesting. Email us at battlebuddiespod@gmail.com.
Yeah. Let's talk about more fun stuff.
Let's go.
Because today's going to have a lot of sad stuff. But there's this guy we have to talk about. This guy in the middle right here. There is a director that we simply have to talk about. His name was William Wyler.
Yeah.
Originally, he gave cameras for planes to shoot footage, but he hated it. So, as Miller describes, he, Wyler, wanted to make a film of power and authenticity, not a piece of fast-style propaganda. He was drawn to Morgan's now famous plane, the Memphis Belle, because of the pinup girl painted on the nose, and that the name was after Morgan's sweetheart he was going to marry when he got home. Morgan has a great line about Wyler joining his plane, stating, I told him, okay, if he didn't get in the way and get us killed, I got to like the guy. He had guts and passion, but he did get in the way.
Guts and passion.
But he did get in the way. Okay. So for this guy, I just have two anecdotes. I can't skip them. They're like crazy. You need to know that like these are like civilian dudes. I'm skipping over some fun stuff. Like these civilians and these like journalists and directors, they give them like random ranks when they come over. And like Wyler's really bad. And he like sees a general and he's like, oh fuck, like what am I supposed to do? He like throws a cigarette down. He like tries to salute him and the general just starts laughing at him because he like is an idiot who doesn't like it's great. All right, so the first anecdote. Whenever the Belle came under fire, Wyler would erupt, scurrying around the plane. A portable oxygen bottle in one hand, a small camera in the other, pointing excitingly at flak bursts of our incoming fighters. Once, when he missed getting a film shot of an exploding flak, he begged Morgan to steer the bomber into the thick of the shrapnel field. Wyler was a Jew from Alsace who wanted to play a part in bringing down Hitler.
That's cool. When
General Eaker ordered him grounded, fearing that the Nazis would turn his capture into a major propaganda victory, Wyler went on another mission anyway. Told by Eaker's aide that he could be court-martialed for directly violating an order, Wyler shot back, I've got to get the film. This guy's cool. He's fun.
That is cool. That's fun. That is a fun character.
Yeah.
I gotta get the film, man. You're going to do 25 to life.
And he's just like, I gotta do it. The second anecdote, and these are both like straight from Miller. Once, Weiler nearly died when his oxygen supply was cut off. And on another mission, he risked his life to get a spectacular shot of a flying fortress lifting off a runway by sitting in the ball turret on takeoff.
Hell no.
Something that no gunner was permitted to do.
Yeah.
And we're going to learn how bad it is to be a gunner turret later on today. It's bad.
Yeah, no, it's not great at all.
So the fact that he got them to approve it, probably by being an insufferable asshole, until they just like, fine, you can die. We don't care anymore.
Dang.
And then he did it. And it's like an amazing shot. And I'm betting it's in like 12 O'Clock High. And
That's
some
pretty
of those other
bold.
movies. Yeah. He's the one
that's
that
like a liability.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's the one that made that film at the end where when Roosevelt saw, he's like, everybody has to see this.
Yeah.
That
was it Air America?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I think it was Air America.
Or is it Fly America?
I gotta look at my notes.
Anyway,
keep going on this Hollywood train. Hap Arnold also recruited Clark Gable, which is a crazy sentence to say out loud. Hap Arnold, the leader of the 8th Air Force, recruited Clark Gable, which is weird.
frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
You know, Clark Gable, the guy from Gone with the Wind.
Name drop.
Yep. I'm going to have to do a little bit of editing because of my coughing.
It's okay.
The men saw him as a pretty boy from Hollywood, but that would change by the end of his second mission. Miller explained the close calls he had early on as a shell tore through the plane, blew the heel off his boot, and excited the fuselage inches from his head. The dude almost died on his second mission, and he kept going back for more. Like, the guy was wild.
How did that not make him famous?
I know.
Like, why?
And his whole story, like, I think he joined because his wife told him to, and then she died, and he's like,
what?
Fuck it, I'll do it.
Dude, that should, again, I feel like that should be the story that makes him famous rather than, what is it, Gone with the Wind?
Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, don't care.
After, you're going to love the ending. I don't know if you remember this part from the book. So, I have a little bit before I get there, but this next part's fun. After these missions, the men accepted him completely, even helping him hide from having to participate in the USO show Bob Hope was hosting. Here is how famous Gable was at the time. Hitler knew he was there, and Hermann Göring put out a $5,000 bounty to bring him in. Gable's solution, and he told all the people on the plane, and they were like, all right, is that if the plane was going down, he wasn't getting off. He was going to go down with the plane.
Dang.
Because he's like, I'm not getting put in a cage for Hitler.
No.
Fuck
and
Hitler.
Hitler would have made him dance, for sure. Dance, monkey, dance.
And he kept going up, like knowing that he wasn't going to parachute no matter what. He was just going to go down with the plane.
Badass.
Dude, absolutely. And the men like loved him. They would go to bars and like the men would try to hide him because like the girls would freak out if he was there. And like, this is really cute. Like a bunch of like 18, 19-year-old dudes are like hanging out with Clark Gable all
can
night.
Can you imagine, dude? It's fucking cool. I guess like a very similar vibe would be Pat Tillman.
Okay.
Like a football player joining the military.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool.
It is cool. Gable loved the men. And this is my favorite story of Gable. This is why I like, besides, I mean, he has like bravery, obviously, just from the anecdotes. And Miller is very careful. So like all the anecdotes that I was reading are like, these are legit. But this is why the guy was, I'll put a value judgment. He was awesome. During a hospital tour, he went on a hospital tour just to visit a bunch of injured men because there's so many injured men at this point. Already, that's a cool thing, right?
Yes.
The surgeon started like kind of showboating for him, right? The surgeon was happy that he was here. So he's like, oh, let me show you some guys. This is from Miller. The surgeon described the injuries of this guy with clinical precision, pointing to each of them. Lung gone, spine severed, ribs broken. Then Gable noticed that the gunner's eyes were getting moist. He grabbed the doctor's arm, pulled him into the hall, pinned him up against the wall, and said, if you ever do anything like that again, I'll kill you.
Dang.
Yeah, dude.
That's crazy.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, that's
Hell
awesome.
yeah, like, that's the guy, right?
Yeah.
That's who should be a celebrity right
that's
there.
That's cool, dude. Fucking.
I got chills every time I
That's dope.
I've reread that line so many times. Like, that is what somebody of like positional power should do.
Yeah, it's just really crazy that ego didn't take over his character.
Yeah.
Like, he really was a good person.
He was just a good person.
Yeah. It's fucking cool.
Okay, here's just a short thing, but I thought it would be good to talk about before we go into like the psychology of everything and some of the more horrific things going on is, and we had alluded to it in Spencer's episode, but the authority on a bomber by 1943 is completely shifted. in terms of what it was originally designed. Originally, it was designed, right, like, what was it, like, drop your socks and grab your nuts, boys. Like, there's stuff like that, right? It's just like you listen to the commanders tell you where to bomb, and you do it. Planes, at this time, they're incredibly tight. They are, like, the tightest you can be.
Oh, yeah.
And the pilots, like, de facto became supreme. And the crews only cared about the pilot's speech before they would go off. They didn't give a fuck about any of the other prep stuff that they did. It was just about, before they went out, the pilot would stand around their crew, and they would give them a little speech of what they were going to do and how they were going to do it, and then they would leave. And that's the only thing the crews... And they've done that in the show very well. Mm-hmm. They have the guys give, like, a short little speech. It's something kind of stupid, and the crews are like, yeah, that's what we're doing.
Let's rack them up and knock them down.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's like, I bet that's what it was, and I bet it worked on those guys.
Yeah.
That's what they were looking for. And, for example, there's a couple stories that Miller talks about. One story is that a gunner got trapped while the plane is going down, and then all the other gunners are like, fuck it, we'll go down with you.
Wow.
For no other reason than they just want their buddy to die alone.
Man, it's like, hopefully by the time people are listening to this, they've listened to our episode with Ron.
Yes.
But, Ron talking about how in the military you just have so much training of what you're supposed to do in situations that I don't think that there's a lot of thinking. I think it's just second nature, muscle memory, and these aren't big decisions that have to be made. They just do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And plus, they're angry at the enemy. I don't know. It's an interesting state of mind to be in.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think it's different from. I would push on that idea slightly, just that. Unlike the infantry, which I agree with, like they've consciously been training themselves to, like, I'm for my brother next to me. These guys, the plane going down at this time, it's slow. Like, it takes a while. And so the fact that, like, they make that decision and then they stick to it.
Yeah.
Like that, there's a certain level of, like, intense bravery to me, because I can impulsively do something brave, but the longer I think about it, I'm like, oh man, is this really the right call right now?
I think that it's something beyond our understanding,
Yep.
sitting here in a cush-ass garage.
Yep. Okay. Things are going to take a dark turn in the story.
Oh, yay!
Yay! And
Bye, Clark Gable. That was fun.
Yep. Hope you guys enjoyed that. We're going to look it in the face, though. We need to, if we are to understand the forced expansion of understanding and nuances of what we now call PTSD. Why did it get so bad in 1943? Well, one reason is that Germany moved planes from the Eastern Front to the Western Front to double their air strength. They took notice of the 8th. They took notice of things happening. And so they started moving a lot of their planes over, so the casualties go up pretty dramatically for America. Before that turn, though, we need to address the fact that this generation... Oh, sorry. I'll do that part again. Before that, though, we need to address the fact that ain't this generation just the worst?
Talking about these aren't baby boomers, are they? What would this generation even be? Oh, it's the greatest generation.
The greatest generation. Well, that was said about those before they fought in World War II. It's just so interesting. Every generation is the worst generation.
Yeah.
Every next generation is the worst.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a guy, and he wrote a bunch of stuff about how, like, this World War II generation is the worst. They're stupid. They're like all the things that we complain about this next generation right now. All the exact same.
Lazy.
It sounds the exact same.
Entitled.
But what I like about this guy, though, is that he changes his mind and he owns it. So then he says, by the time they're fighting in World War II, the challenge of total war revealed the same high qualities that have always been beneath the skin of the American people when the time of great testing has stripped them lean. So, I would present the slightly off-topic argument that each generation is fine, but it is hard to see what the baby fat of peaceful civilization around them. That's something Spencer and I have been playing with a lot.
Yeah.
Because we teach middle school, and they're the worst. But they don't seem like they have to be the worst. Like, there's a lot of, like, colonels, and they're like, you are almost an interesting person.
Yes.
You just suck. Like, you're almost there.
Our friend, our coworker and friend, Chris Brossato, he likes to say, in their minds, they think, I exist, therefore I deserve.
Yeah.
That's his thing.
I do think that in a great testing, they would show the same qualities that every generation's shown in America.
Wish I shared the same
Optimism.
thoughts. I mean, you're probably right. Well, every generation has their test. It's coming for them.
Yep.
It's coming.
So it's just something to think about, listeners, but also, ain't it funny that it just never changes? Like,
Ever.
they thought what's now called the greatest generation was just the
What a
worst.
bunch of dirtbags.
Yeah, they're wearing baggy clothes, like it's all the same shit. Okay, back to the carnage. Horrible events during these bombing runs would spread quickly across vast distances. One such story was of a ball turret gunner. So the reason why I'm talking about those two little side tangents, with the great generation thing, that's going to become important because we're going to be talking about the breaking of like the mental will of these soldiers. And I'm going to argue that they're not cowards. And everybody that's a professional in this time period is arguing that they are not cowards. And so I just wanted to make that clear ahead of time. Yeah, okay. So let's talk about this ball turret gunner. Before we talk about the ball turret gunner, let's talk about the story first. Fuck, the story is brutal, though. You know what story I'm talking about?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when the plane was in the air, they had just completed their mission. Let me explain what a ball turret gunner is. When a plane is in the air, the ball turret would descend under the plane, under the belly of the plane. It would then be pulled up before the plane landed. So, when the plane was in the air, the ball turret would come down, and then the guy would sit inside the ball, and he would have his like 250 cal, whatever.
Scary.
And just shoot shit.
Bro, so scary.
In a little piece of like plastic, essentially. Crazy. One ball turret got jammed, and the wheels of the plane also became jammed, which is very common if you know anything about B-17s, B-24s. And I know I made fun of username DBFlyGuy for knowing the difference between all the planes, and now I'm kind of like, well, of course your B-17s and B-24s have problems with. That's why they have the quick access cranks for the wheels and shit, because it's just a staple of those bombers.
Does the turret goes down on a crank as well?
I think the turret does go down on a crank. Well. Yes. And if it didn't, I bet it had a crank as a redundant.
Problems are going to happen.
Yeah, because those bombers had redundant cranks for like everything.
Have to.
Like the wheels. So it got jammed, and then the wheels became jammed. The plane flew in circles for an hour or so trying to figure out what to do. Yeah. A witness wrote down, "He knew what comes down first when there are no wheels. We all watched in horror as it happened. For those struggling to visualize the story, the plane had to land on its belly, crushing the ball turret gunner into the plane." So their buddy, right? So I was trying to tell you guys that planes are tight-knit groups right now. And like you have gunners dying with other gunners so they don't have to die by themselves. And then you have this guy trapped under it, and the pilot has to kill him because he has to land his plane eventually. He's going to run out of fuel. There's no other solution because the wheels always get jammed on these things. And it was a slow process because he flew for as long as he could, them trying to think of a solution to it. And everybody on the base knew by the time it happened. And that's why I was trying to talk about how these stories go vast distances pretty quickly because they're all in planes. So they're all going to different bases all the time for things. And these stories are not staying local, and it's going to fuck with them over time. Here's a poem about ball turret gunners that I just really like. "From my mother's sleep, I fell into the state, and I hunched in its belly till my wet fur froze. 6 miles from earth, loose from its dream of life, I woke to black flak in the nightmare fighters. When I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose."
Fuck.
Ooh, that is
doozy.
That is the poem, man.
Where did you get that poem?
It's from an anthology when I was an English major.
Oh, damn. Okay. Wow. That's interesting.
I forget. The guy's not like super well known. He was like a teacher, professor. I think he was like a Southern revivalist kind of guy. He was in World War II. He may have committed suicide. They don't know. I remember that.
Fun.
Yay. But I love that. That poem is great. The whole idea, I remember analyzing it. I remember the day I analyzed it I had to like teach it to a class. And it was fun because the fell into the state, right? So for my mother's sleep, I fell into the state being America, or the state being these like random non-human entities that can make you do things like kill people and die.
Mm-hmm.
And you hunched in the belly with your wet fur froze. And now we know, because these are depressurized and they often get holes in them in the ball turret gunners. Like, he's literally talking about freezing to death while this happening and getting frostburn. And I like he's loosed from the dream of life, but then the nightmare fighters come. So it's like, is he awake? Is he not awake? Is he alive? Is he not alive? And then it just ends with like a great kind of Stephen Crane-esque line where it's, when I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose.
Yeah, that's fucking carnage, dude.
Yeah.
It's fucking really intense to imagine someone just spraying guts out of a turret. You know what I mean? That's just wild. It's gross.
I think that's Stephen. Is Stephen Crane though? You probably don't know. He's it's like an American push in poetry for like realism, but like in a weird way.
Okay.
So it's like, I ate my heart because it was bitter.
Okay.
And it was my heart.
Well, this is why I have you, Kevin. You explain things like this to me. I don't know Stephen Crane.
Yeah. I like that type of style where it's just like, this is fucked up because it's fucked up, and we don't need to do anything flowery with it because it's just fucked up.
For sure.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's talk about some brothers.
Brothers. All brothered up.
So Jack Mathis received a posthumous Medal of Honor for climbing back into his bomb site after being hit, pulling the lever, and calling out bombs before dying. His brother, Mark Mathis, got switched to his brother's plane, slept in his brother's bed, and was killed over the same bomb site on the very next mission.
No.
Yes.
Oh, God.
As Salisbury reported, to fly in the 8th Force then was to hold a ticket to a funeral, your own. So I'm telling you these horrible stories. I'm just cherry-picking a couple of them. There's a whole, just hundreds of pages of these to like bring you to the place where it's not okay and these stories are traveling. And like, these guys are all aware that they don't have a strong likelihood of making it back home.
Oh, no.
Pilots had to punch co-pilots who passed out in intense firefights.
Yes, sir.
That happened more than once. Like, you would freeze up because you're flying and planes are just coming at you and shooting you, and there's flak coming from the ground. And it's intense. It's just like utterly intense. And so people are passing out on this. Like, and
just from so much stress and anxiety that your body's like, you know what? Time to go to sleep.
There was one guy who was blown free from his plane. He survived. He got up. And he had to then watch his plane and everybody all the dudes he loved, crash right in front of him and burn alive. And he couldn't get to them before they all died.
God, I just fucking try to imagine the fear in these people, because you're up so high.
They're up so high.
Oh my God, dude. It's so terrifying. It's so scary.
Yeah. So, let's talk about it. The stress was getting to the men. They were known to turn out their lights with Tommy guns at this point, which is crazy.
Really?
Yeah. They said they would use pistols and Tommy guns to shoot out the lights or to write their initials on the wall when they were bored. Like, their heads weren't right.
Yeah, clearly. Is this like a 1,000-yard stare thing you got going on? Yeah.
The men spoke openly about what they called being flak happy. At this time, being yellow or a coward was punishable by death. And I did a little bit of research. I don't think the U.S. has ever executed somebody for it, but other nations definitely have. It's a big part of World War I.
For sure.
World War I has Dan Carlin has a blueprint to Armageddon. It's amazing. And he got me into reading through some of these like British generals they're not sure if they should do it or not. They're like, the guy doesn't seem very cowardly. Like, he's ready for execution. And the guy's like, I'm ready. Like, just kill me. Like, I'm not going back out there. And it's just like, they're not cowards, like you say, but they're not going back in the fighting, or they're not ready to fight. And so there's this weird, tumultuous, fighting isn't what it used to be, and we're not catching up to it yet. And so these old discipline models are like weird.
It kind of reminds me of when we were studying Lady Golf and we were talking about the kamikaze, and you said something like it's just a irresponsible use of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
It is. And they tried, yeah. So, to the U.S.'s credit, I don't think they execute people for cowardice.
No, I think they just say that you're allowed to so that you don't.
Yes. And what I was trying to think through is there's still a social stigma to it at this time and now. Like, if you are a military, if you're a serviceman and you're called a coward, like, you literally can't get a job after that. Like, you're probably going to get dishonorably discharged for being a coward. And, like, you have to write that on a job application. Who's going to hire you? Like, the fuck?
On my resume, it says coward.
Yeah, it says I'm an official coward of the U.S. military. Like, that's damning in every possible way.
Yes.
So I don't think these men are cowards. We'll get more to that in a second. In 2024, it is obvious to most of us that virtually none of these men were cowards by any modern definition. What they're going through in the air, just those quick stories I was telling you, are brutal, right? Ball turret gunner gets stuck. Everybody has to watch their buddy die. And like they can hear him. They can see him. They just can't get him out of there. The two brothers dying over the same bomb site that dropped bombs. Like, that's wild. Miller is trying to make the argument that these soldiers weren't cowardly by 1940s definitions either, which is what I really appreciate about him, and that it was very hard for the leaders to understand what to do with them. Why is this important? If it was just cowardice, then the military would simply punish them and move on. Since it was not, the leadership and men would make questionable decisions. So this is what I kind of want to get into right now. I want to talk about what the leadership did, which is kind of fucked up, and also some really good ideas too. And then what the men did, which was kind of fucked up, and some really good decisions too. Nothing is like clean right now. To recap what Spencer had said, to be done with your deployment, you had to fly 25 missions. Okay, so by 1943, if you wanted to survive, you had to fly 25 missions. The 25 mission mark was part of the despair. In winter of 1943, no one made it. No one survived long enough to make the 25 missions. So that's like, can you imagine like being the new guy and you go there and like, when you make 25 missions, you get to go home and they're like, oh, who's made 25? Like, no, everybody's died before they made 25. Oh shit.
It's tragic, dude.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy.
So this is where I'm having a hard time not judging Eaker. Eaker was asked to reduce the number from 25 to 15 because it's not working. Like the men are cracking before 25. He declined. In March of 1944, just a couple of months later, it's going to go up to 30. By July, it's going to go up to 35. I didn't realize that it wasn't 25. It was only 25 for that little
They
short
made
time.
it go up.
It went up to 35.
Were there less people joining, do you think? Or did they just have less pilots available?
They needed to, part of the issue that the 8th keeps running into is they don't have the full power that they keep promising. And so their missions aren't as successful as they should be.
Okay.
Because their men keep dying too fast. Miller's conclusion on leadership is that, and this is quoting from Miller here, there is also strong circumstantial evidence that bomb group commanders suppressed evidence of mental breakdowns. And there is indisputable evidence that personal testimonies that many flyers experiencing excruciating anxiety hid their conditions from both their commanders and their crewmates to avoid punishment or censure, or because they wanted to complete their tours of duty as rapidly as possible.
Yeah, that's so sad.
That's
so sad.
Yes. That's the most damning, like, that's not okay that they
That's
felt
really,
that they couldn't
really
do it.
bad. That's
And
sad.
we talked about it a tiny bit in Spencer's episode. Your mission count doesn't count if your plane has to turn around, if you are out because of a mental breakdown. So these guys are probably like how I would do, like, I'm having a mental breakdown. I'm aware of that, but I still have to do 25 missions, and that number's not going to go down. So I might as well just stick it out and go back into the plane, which is not good for everybody else in that plane with me, right?
No.
Like, but I'd have a hard time not doing that. Like,
have you seen Catch-22? Have you watched the show or read the book?
I read the book in high school, I think. Or
I believe the fucking author, Joseph Heller.
Yeah.
I think he did like something like 65 flying missions. Most of them were milk runs.
Yeah.
But still. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
It's insane.
Okay. I don't know how much judgment we can pass on Eaker or the other leaders. because it is hard to understand the pressures they were under in relation to their understanding of how to help. I do concede that point. Thought a lot about it. Originally I wrote a bunch of stuff just blasting Eaker, but
it's hard, dude.
And I do think that they wanted their guys not to die.
I agree.
Yeah. One point for the Army, like in their favor, was that they sent this guy, John W. Appel, to study what was going on. This guy's like not known. Like there's not a lot about this guy. I tried to do a bunch of research on him. Yeah, he's just kind of this. He wrote this report, and his report's really good. So he's an interesting guy. I did find one like chapter of a book about him. So Rebecca Plant makes an argument about him in this piece that she wrote called "Preventing the Inevitable: John Appel and the Problem of the Psychiatric Casualties in the U.S. Army During World War II." It's a terrible title. Academics make terrible titles. So anyway, her argument essentially is that Appel's time in the front line, specifically in the Italian war zone, changed him to advocate strongly for limited tours of duty. It didn't change much of World War II because it came so late in the war, because the report, by the time it gets circulated, and by the time the general reads it, and then by the time it actually, like, they think of what to do with the action of what they read, the war's over. But it is absolutely, it changed a lot of U.S. military policy to conserve manpower, starting in the Korean War and definitely in the Vietnam War. So a lot of men not getting out for too long of combat tours in both of those wars, they can thank that guy Appel for doing it. Like, he's the reason why. Which is kind of, what a cool legacy.
That's incredible.
Like, you made your country more efficient in what it's doing.
Yeah. And
you saved more men's lives in their mental states, which, like, thank you, Appel.
Yeah,
like,
that's incredible.
Yeah, man.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have to imagine, like, I couldn't find that much on the guy. I wanted to figure out if he was bold or not, because he doesn't strike me as a bold guy when I'm reading his stuff. But to, like, write that kind of report, no one's going to like reading it. Like, the generals that are reading it are not going to be like, this is great. I can't wait to, like, talk to everybody about this. They're going to read, like, fuck you, man. Like, you're really going to write this?
You really fucking, you buddy fucked us, for sure.
And so, kudos to him, man.
Dude.
He wrote what he thought was right.
Yeah, sorry. This is just the information that I have.
Yes.
Very just scientific, and that's good.
Yeah. It reminds me, because we were just watching, because we're doing the Holocaust right now, Nicholas Winton. Do you know him? He's the guy. He's just like a stockbroker. He was like really successful. He's an athlete. He was like super in shape. He lived to 106, like super healthy guy.
Whoa.
And he saved 669 kids during the Holocaust.
Dang.
He like forged their documents and bribed a bunch of people and got them all on trains and got them out.
Dang.
And I was watching a thing on it in like 2015 from 60 Minutes, and they calculated all the families that have been started by these people that survived. So they're like, theoretically, he saved 15,000 people.
Wow.
Because they all have families. And like, this one guy.
That's crazy.
And he didn't tell anybody.
Just a humble ass dude.
Yeah. If you want to cry great tears, because it just makes you feel really good from something horrible, in the 80s, the BBC did like a talk show thing, and they invited him to it without him knowing, because his wife had like found his documents. And they put everybody in the crowd. They were all the kids that he saved. And they're like, Nicholas, so you're here. If Nicholas has saved your life, can you just stand up for me? And everyone stands up around him, and he's like,
Does he start crying?
Yeah, he starts crying immediately, because like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
It's great.
Damn. That's like that. They should have that for that Hello Human Kindness commercial.
Yes.
Like, instead of like some jackass grandpa being like, here's a baseball, it's like, hey, here's 15,000 people you saved. Hello Human Kindness.
Exactly. All right. Getting back to his report for the 8th, he said that there was no getting used to combat. And then later also wrote, given sufficient stress, even the best men broke down. A fighting man's reservoir of courage, his ability to adapt to fear, was limited. Which we all know, like, it sounds obvious now, but it wasn't obvious. Like, they thought it was being a coward. So he's, to my mind, pushing against stuff.
It's just crazy because for the longest time in warfare, longer than not, we weren't using planes.
Right.
Like, most warfare was on the ground or on the sea.
Yes.
And so for this type of warfare to be in the air like this, as you've said before, is just a very first and last thing.
First and last.
Yeah.
which is crazy.
It's
It's like the
fucking-
Dreadnought battle that we covered in Letty Gulf, which
Mhm.
now that we've covered so much more and read so much more, what a cool battle that we covered, because it is a first and last battle.
Dude, totally.
Like there'll never be that much
No,
tonnage
no.
of ships out
No.
at the same time fighting.
Dude, go check out our Lady Gulf series.
Yeah, we did a great job on that.
That work is incredible.
Okay. This echoes the reports written by the great First Lord Baron Morin. So Miller references Lord Baron Morin. I read a bunch of his stuff in preparation for this because he's fascinating. And he has ties into Churchill, which we'll cover. History buffs that are listening, thanks for listening, by the way, might know of Morin, or the name might sound familiar because he later served as Churchill's private physician. And he kind of he had some crazy things to say about Churchill, I guess, and it's like he wrote a book or something. It's interesting.
He definitely is not an alcoholic.
Yeah, it was about Churchill doesn't have a will to live, and Churchill was depressed and gonna kill himself, kind of stuff. I think, I don't know. People are so intense about Churchill; it's hard to read about him.
That's true.
But before he was Churchill's private physician, Morin was on the front lines during World War I. And he did a lot to push our understanding of what we now call PTSD. For example, he stated, so this is World War I, he's stating this stuff when he's on the front lines. Which also, these doctors going to the front lines to learn, fuck yeah, man.
Shout out to doctors.
Absolutely. Going to the front lines of a trench warfare, but just to learn, because he went to do a report. He didn't go for any other reason. He just wanted to help them by doing research. Props, man.
Yeah, that's dope.
That takes courage. So he stated, a man's courage is his capital, and he is always spending. That's been sticking with me. You have your courage is your capital, and you're always spending it. You're always spending it.
Would you say that is, it's safe to say that he means it runs out?
Yes. No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
That it is a finite amount of capital that you have available to you.
Sorry, folks. It only goes so far.
Later on, he also writes, in the presence of danger, man often finds salvation in action. And then finally, when we go to the word courage, which is what he talked about earlier, he shrewdly observed that courage is a moral quality. It is not a chance gift of nature like an aptitude for games. It is a cold choice between two alternatives. The fixed resolve not to quit, an act of renunciation which must be made not once, but many times. By the power of the will, courage is willpower. Whew.
Dude, what's the most courageous thing you've ever done?
Nothing like what these guys are fucking doing.
he's like, I don't even have. I rock climbed once. And,
okay, courageous. Yeah, I have my one courageous. I felt like I was being brave, which was when Jude was first born, he wasn't breathing, and they took him to the NICU, but Hannah was in bad shape and they were stitching her up, and I didn't know where to go.
Yeah.
And a midwife came to me that she was awesome. She was an actual angel to me. She just was you are going to run into the NICU, you're going to put your hands on your kid, and you aren't going to let any fucking person tell you what to do, and you are not going to take your hands off.
That's amazing.
And I was okay, that's what I'm doing for the however many hours is it going to take. I'm not going to move. I'm just going to put my hands, and I did it. And the doctors were they were nice, but I was I'm not moving. You can do whatever you need to do. And I felt brave. I was I'm going to do this. I am committing to it.
That's an incredible story. I never knew that.
Yeah. Jude's okay.
Yeah, Jude survived, everyone, by the way.
It was intense. It was scary. All right. Oh, man. What a terrible moment. Yeah, because he came out. The midwife is yelling at the doctor, he was warm. He was warm. Just to make sure that they didn't think that it was a stillborn.
Babies, dude.
Babies, dude. It's intense. I can't believe that the humankind has been successfully giving birth for thousands of years.
I literally baffles me. Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Appel's report got some psychiatrists to go into the eighth spaces to help the flight surgeons get a handle on things. So the flight surgeons are in charge of all of this right now. And it's so much for them. They have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
But these psychiatrists, and when I'm talking about the going on bases, they're flying on missions with these guys. It's pretty wild. People doing good things, as far as I'm concerned. For example, Lieutenant David G. Wright flew 5 combat missions with Curtis LeMay's 305th Bomb Group. Curtis LeMay from Spencer's episode. In other words, as far as I'm concerned, there were some brave men trying their best to help these bomber groups in real time. They're trying to do real-time research to come up with real-time solutions for them. And I just have so much respect for that. This had a positive effect on those flight surgeons. To figure out if men actually experience this combat fatigue, they had to understand the man's baseline. Therefore, they just became obsessed with their men, which was good overall. I think that's just a great... I wish my doctor cared more about me, right? Like,
yeah, I wish my doctor was obsessed with me.
Yeah, like what a good thing. They would go to the bars with them and just watch them. They would go to the meals and just watch them. They'd go to the barracks and just watch them. And they just would watch them all day long.
It's incredible.
So that they could see when things would start getting weird, which is great.
It's incredible.
Quick recap on everything, because I know we've talked a lot so far. Men were losing it from the horrors of the war. Everyone knew it wasn't cowardice. Some started figuring out successful ways to identify combat fatigued. Now, how did they treat them, right? You can identify it. What the fuck do you do with it? Also, I'm very proud of this gif of Ace Ventura in an interrogation room.
Yeah, good job,
Thank
dude.
You. I worked really hard on that. Well, how did they treat them? They would use sodium amytal. Knock the guy out for 48 hours.
Yeah.
And then talk to them after. The idea was that it would be easier to process trauma if it was further away through a sympathetic talk treatment. I actually don't hate this idea for a wartime treatment.
I don't know.
Because the guy's freaking out, right? The guy's like, ah!
Yeah.
And they're like, just sleep. Just sleep. And then when they wake up, the sympathetic talking, like, is just like, hey, man, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Like, is it the best solution? No, it's absolutely not the best solution.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if repressing a memory is a good thing,
No,
right?
But I like the idea of, like, getting some distance from it.
Sure.
There's something to that. And
for the time?
Yeah. Like, and sympathetic talking, like, just, like, being kind to a guy and be like, listen, man, you went through some shit.
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah. Like, there are worse ways to deal with.
I agree, I guess. For the time, like, that's... what else are they going to fucking do?
What else are they going to do?
Yeah.
Where it gets a little wacky, though, was when that treatment didn't work. They would then use sodium pentanol, which is what we also call the truth serum. They would dose them up, put them into a dark room, and as Miller puts it, aggressively probed and provoked the patient, trying to induce him to relive the traumatic experiences that had sent him into the emotional descent. Big swing and a miss.
Good. Yeah.
They would put them in a dark room and try to make them relive the moment.
Yeah, just treated them like terrorists.
They would sit, like, if it was a co-pilot, the psychiatrist would try to learn from the interrogations and stuff, like, what happened on the mission, and then he would pretend to be the pilot while this guy is high off his mind.
Yeah.
And he'd be saying the things that the pilot said in real time. And they'd be trying to, like, make them feel like when they got shot, and this is the real time they got shot, thinking that it would process through it. And it fucked these guys up.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is going to be in the show.
No, there's no... If they put this in the show will have my respect, and I will forgive everything if they show good, like, because the thing is that they're not Germans. These are like Americans. These are
totally
decorated, successful American military professionals, and I want that. I want the guy who is given an award for doing this.
Yeah, we'll see, dude. I mean, this is kind of why I'm glad we're covering this shit, so people can listen to this and be like, oh.
Yeah. One other strategy, so there's a third strategy that they tried, which is actually another interesting one. It was through Air Force public relations. So they started pushing reporters to go to the bases and do stories about anyone who they could find. And the idea was that crews wanted someone to know that they were fighting and dying. Kids just wanted to know that they were dying.
Yeah.
And I imagine that helped a lot of, like, young guys get back into the plane the next day.
Yeah.
Just like, telling their story one night and the guy being like, I'm going to put this in my local paper.
But that's cathartic. That's why we
Absolutely.
had Ron come on here. And if you're a veteran, come on, dude. Tell your story.
Yep.
Super good for you.
All right. How are you feeling so far?
Great.
It's crazy. What a crazy story.
Yeah, I feel great.
Okay, let's just go through casualties up to this point. So in the first 10 months of operations, the 8th has lost 188 heavy bombers and just about 2,000 crew members, not counting those dead and wounded who returned to England in their battered ships. Approximately 73% of the combat flyers who had arrived in England in the summer and fall of 1942 failed to complete their tour of duty.
73%?
73% failed to complete their tour of duty.
That's like most.
Yeah,
That's most.
57% were killed or missing in action. 16% had either been seriously wounded, killed in crashes in England, or permanently grounded by serious physical or mental disabilities. On May 29th, the 8th Air Force flew mission number 61, putting 279 heavies into the air. This ended what Eaker has called the 8th testing period. So this all has just been a test up until this point.
Good.
Yeah. So it's, in my mind, not going well.
No.
We talked a little bit about it at the beginning, right, in our first part one, that the bombers didn't have escorts because the bombers were too damn fast.
Mm-hmm.
Arnold at this time is going to make what they consider one of his most important memos, where he's like, we need escorts. Like, we need to build escorts. We have to get them to Germany so fucking fast.
Yeah.
So that's kind of I think he says, I have the quote here. He says that he needs to get there. They need to get there about 6 months, because he says in about 6 months we're going to be deep in German territory, and we should probably have some fucking escorts there by then. And we'll see when we listen to Spencer's if they get them or not. In this time period also, that wolf pack that we've been talking about, the B-24 Liberators hunted down the wolf pack far out at sea and the lighter aircraft flying from escort carriers, finishing them off. So they did defeat the wolf pack. That was a big deal. That's like one of their big successes.
Hell yeah.
And Miller, in this time period of the war, he's very careful. He doesn't say like everyone's fucking up, but he says like there is an argument to be made that like they're kind of fucking up. So he says essentially that they shouldn't be necessarily going out on all these missions. They should be trying to build back up their fleets and then go on the missions at full power.
That's what I would say.
So when Miller's saying it, it's probably true.
Yeah. What do we got here? Oh
yeah,
boy.
We're gonna go a little bit casually through this. This would be like chapter 6 of the story. Chapter 6 is a lot about concrete. So, but it's like a ton of concrete.
It's like a lot.
We talked about it with Nazis. Like, one of Hitler's proudest things about the Nazi reign is the amount of concrete he poured.
Well, yeah. Those pens that you were talking about earlier, 3/4 of what it took to build Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one, well, I have some facts for this one. One problem with invading with air power is you need runways to do so.
Yep.
Miller calls the pouring of this concrete stuff the biggest civil works project in the history of Great Britain. That's crazy to say.
Mm-hmm.
Great Britain's pretty old.
Yes, sir.
Crews were able to lay a half-mile runway a day.
Wow.
By D-Day, one engineering unit in England had poured enough concrete to build a 2-lane highway across the channel and had laid enough brick to build the tallest skyscraper in the world.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
That's a lot.
That's a very World War II thing to say.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to include them and not skip them over because the work was super fucking hard. Like, it was not okay. They are breathing into straight up concrete, like dust. Which if you ever had to build a stupid side part of your driveway with your dad as a kid, you know what I'm talking about when he makes you mix it in the wheelbarrow over and over again.
Dude, if it's one thing that we have been learning from Thermopylae to fucking Julius Caesar to all this shit is that, or like New Orleans, fucking war is about building shit.
It's about building. Yeah. How fast can you build?
Yeah, you got to build shit.
Shout out to my dad for making me ready
to build.
Yeah,
shit.
I mixed so much concrete and wheelbarrows as a kid.
Nice.
I say so much, probably not as much as other people. Like a couple times.
Enough.
And being like, I don't think I want to do this as a job.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm gonna get yelled at by teenagers.
Yeah, yeah. This is so much better. All right. So anyway, they're calling themselves mules. when these enlisted guys that are pouring this concrete and working, and it's like super fucking cold and miserable, and it's like really wet, so the concrete's really hard to put down. It's miserable. And then in one of these moments, there's a plane that crashes. I think it was returning from a mission, and this guy is quoted, one of the mules. He says, "Everything went quiet as all those poor guys were taken to sickbay. Suddenly all the mud and cold and rain and damp that we had to endure seemed pretty small beer."
Perspective is a thing.
Because their work was shitty. Like,
oh, dude, I'm imagining myself in that position, and I'd be like complaining
pissed.
the entire time.
And because you're not in combat, so like, what am I even doing here? Right? There's like an existential part of that.
Yep.
I also wanted to just briefly talk about that the interactions between the two cultures were mixed to the strongest degree, because I feel like we should just be upfront about all that. So on one hand, you'll have stories about guys missing their families, and they'll just be sitting there unwrapping presents on Christmas with just like random British kids, and like they'll do that the whole day. And like the British people write about like how much they just love these guys for just how much they clearly miss their family back home. And then you have guys getting 16-year-old girls drunk and pregnant, and then no one owning up to it. And then when they finally do own up to it, because they were being charged, the whole unit was being charged like $10 a day or something like that until someone owned up to it. So then they owned up to it, and then the U.S. military is like, we're just going to move them to a different base.
Ooh.
We don't want them to get married to the girls.
Yeah.
Or talk to them ever again.
Ooh.
So they brushed that one under the rug.
Not great.
Not great.
Like, that's just, there's so much wrong with that. I don't even know where to begin.
Yep.
It's like very recent in history. There should have been some repercussions for that.
A little bit.
16 years old.
Yep.
Yikes.
And it's hard.
Greatest generation.
It's hard to put in perspective because we're in this like internet, era. But these towns that they're building these runways on are like tiny country Tolkien-esque towns.
Rural.
That they've had the same 1,000 people in them for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And their lives are like they run out of beer multiple times. The whole town runs out of beer because of the Americans.
Right.
And like the culture shock is like super real. And so then to also have those things, like these essentially just rape things in my mind, happen, then it's like, oh man, I kind of get why sometimes some people probably have some hard opinions about Americans.
Yeah.
Because it's come up in every battle we've covered.
I mean, even Ron was talking about when they were, what country were they in? Where he was saying
Korea.
And he was like, shit was crazy.
Yeah,
and he was confusing and conflicting for him. He's like, I thought we had the moral high ground here.
It's just, it goes with war.
Yeah.
Okay. So we finished that testing phase, right? So now we're into a new phase. And when Spencer picks back up next time, it's going to be about this new phase. Like, shit's going to get real. The perspective is going to go much more towards the not pilots, but the planes.
Yes.
So it's going to be about like missions and things that are happening. But I want to wrap this up. I want to make sure that you guys understand like the Casablanca conference again. So it's going to come into resolution. So in June of 1943, we get this new offensive from the Casablanca conference called Operation Point Blank, which will be very important to what we talk about. The idea with Point Blank was to have the 8th focus purely on German Air Force and aircraft production before the invasion date that was originally set for May 1st, 1944, which is we're going to call Operation Overlord eventually. Yes. So before Operation Overlord, before we can invade, Point Blank has to do its job, which is we talked about at the top of this episode. There was a lot of politics at this time involving Arnold and Eaker. I'm going to skip the majority of it simply because I want to start shifting our focus back to the planes. I feel like we've done a good job setting up context. We can go now to have the stories. I want to hear about the people.
Boom, boom, pow, pow.
Yeah. One conversation that was telling about things to come involves Eaker and Arnold. Eaker, in a moment of clarity, said, "One of my principal worries now," he confided to Arnold, "is that our official supporters in the highest levels and our supporting public may not be able to stand our losses in combat." He then makes a very accurate prediction. "We may as well frankly admit that it is going to be a bloody battle. The side will win which can make good its losses. In other words, the side who has the most reserve strength. That goes back to like the Baron, the Morin guy, like courage and stuff. It's finite. It's capital. You only have so much. How much does your nation have? How much loss can your nation suffer through? Let's end with a connection to the Master Surveyor show, though. I thought this would be... So we had just watched the first 2 episodes, and so I went back and found the quote, because I was like, I know this scene from the book. Remember that scene in the first episode about Bucky going over France by accident?
Yeah.
Well, here's where the scene came from. All the planes of the 100th landed except one, the fortress piloted by John Brady. On the final leg of its flight over the Atlantic, Harry Crosby made a navigation error and they missed England. After nearly flying over Nazi-occupied France, they changed course and found the Big Island. But the landing gear froze and they crash-landed on a runway on England's rugged western coast. No one was hurt, not even the crew's new mascot Meatball. So the husky that they had kidnapped in Ireland. The countryside looked peaceful. Anyway. I thought that was cool. That's like exactly like the scene.
Yeah, that's cool.
So the show
has
even
its
though,
accuracies.
yeah, I was like, even though I'm critiquing it a lot, like I still like it. And,
oh, dude, I'm having a blast
yes.
watching it.
And they are like that is exactly like that is in the book.
Yeah. It has been just, I've been beside myself with joy diving into this book, learning about these veterans, learning about this portion of the war, comparing all of them mixed together. It's been just a blast, and I'm just honored and privileged to be sharing this with you, dude.
Same.
It's been fun. So,
any questions? If we're recapping our timeline, we started in 1943 today.
Mm-hmm.
We're ending kind of around 1944-ish. I think that's where you pick up. Or are you going to pick up in like June of 1943?
June.
Yeah, so you're going to pick up middle of 1943.
Yeah, the next episode's going to be from June to like September.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that'll be, for those watching the show, like episode 2 and probably episode 3.
Yeah, so it looks like episode 3 dropped tonight, and it says that the little blurb below it said something like they finally get their first mission to bomb over Germany.
Yep.
So
that'll be Armstrong potentially leading that. He might be a character in it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's gonna be a doozy.
It's a doozy.
Things are gonna start popping off in the show and here.
Yes.
So stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah.
We appreciate the shit out of our listeners. We've been getting a lot of traffic lately. So like, thank you all for whoever's listening. Please rate and review the show if you have not already done so. Please subscribe to our mailing list, subscribe to our Discord, our Instagram, all the things. We're on all the things. Yep. We got a merch store up. And
the merch and Patreon are the best ways to support us.
Yeah, exactly. Very much
if you want us to do more content.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, talk to us.
Please.
I love getting feedback of like which jokes people like or don't like. That's been like really fun for me because as we've been getting more traffic, but then like learning from like people's wives of like which jokes that their husbands were laughing at, and they're like, I'm like, that's cool. Like I know which joke landed. Like it's fun.
Yeah. It's also cool to just hear little tidbits of what people are learning. Ron was just like, I really liked hearing about how the wine, the wine.
Yeah, the wine part of Caesar. That was cool.
Yeah, it's cool to hear people learning, dude. And it's like, I don't know, it's very reaffirming to make me feel like, oh, me and Kevin are actually doing something here, and it's fun, and we're enjoying it, and also curating a really fun portion of history.
Absolutely.
So,
and we're touching on things that are going to be hard to find. Like I told you, I did a lot of research for Appel, and there's not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think I found a picture of him on Facebook. Maybe.
Facebook.
I was like, I'm not going to post this. I couldn't source that one.
Yeah, so let us know if you guys are enjoying this. Feel free to hit us up, like you said. And next week we'll be back with some more Masters of the Air.
Yes.
Dude, until next time, bonsai.